Welcome back to CamBro Conversations, and today's conversation I'm joined by John Viola. John, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Colin. Looking
And
forward to it.
when we were getting organised for this, I was saying to you, we've had so many different types of guests on the podcast, but we've not talked about a subject that I'm a big fan of personally, football, but in particular football agency, which I don't think there's anyone better placed in Scotland to speak to than yourself.
Right, hopefully.
But you're Scotland's first football agent. Is that the kind of tagline you go by?
I was up there with one of the first ones in Scotland. I certainly in the UK, and in most of the UK, I was in the first 25 agents or 30 agents in the whole of the UK. Nearly 30 years ago, Colin.
I was going to say, when did it all start?
30 years ago. You know, when I'd done my first deal. So I was one of the first ones, and a wee group or two or three that started in Scotland as well.
Yeah, and what's the entry point like at that point in time? It's very different now, and we're going to definitely get onto that. But 30 years ago, how does somebody go about becoming a football agent?
At that time, Colin, we had to give FIFA £100,000 bond 30 years ago. And to this day, I still don't know where I got it from, except I remember borrowing money from my sister, selling a car, selling a wee flat. I borrowed money from my mate. But you had to have £100,000 bond. You had to pass a test with the SFA.
Is it fit and proper or something like that?
It was just a general test about who you were and whatever. And an interview with SFA where I remember I got interviewed up at Park Gardens, and you had to pass the interview, pass the test, and then give FIFA £100,000. And as I say, where I got that from, I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm sure you paid them back after a short period. Or did you get it back from FIFA?
Yeah. It's a 5-year bond, Colin, where you give them the money. They give you whatever bank rate, and then as long as you've conducted yourself correctly, then they give you the whole of the money back. Fortunately, I got it all back.
Yeah.
And give it back to all the people I borrowed it from.
Yeah, of course. And nowadays it's very, very different. But before you got into football agency, and obviously you've got that £100,000 on the line, what kind of prompted you to decide that's the career for me? That's what I'm going to go after, because it's a huge gathering of finances at that point in terms of you having these conversations with your sister, your friends, selling the car to put that on the line. What kind of was the prompt to say, right, I'm going to go after this?
Well, I was in financial services business. Basically, I was selling life assurance. It sounds posh, financial services. And I had a lot of really good clients who were centred around high net worth individuals. And a few of them were footballers. And at that time, the agency business was just starting. And then one or two people I knew that got involved in it, and we started talking about it. And I thought, I wouldn't mind having a go at that. And that's how it started. One or two of the players said, look, John, we trust you, we know you. Would you be interested in doing a deal for me? And I started by doing one or two wee deals, and I got the bug for it, and I thought, right, have a wee go at this. And I knew it was something that was going to take off, which obviously it has now.
I suppose because they had that trust in you with financial matters like that, it would probably not be a huge step away from doing that. And equally, if you were comfortable having conversations about their finances and their future with life insurance, for example,
sure,
then it's not a massive step to say, well, I'm going to talk to the club that you deal with, whatever, about how much you're going to be paid for the next 4 or 5 years, or whatever the structure was at that point in time. So you're maybe a bit more relaxed going into it than your average Joe who would have said, right, I'm going to be a football agent.
Well, there's a lot of transferable skills from dealing with people about finances and contracts, and for me, I'm not saying it was easy, because it was certainly a very different world, but I probably found it a bit easier than your average Joe Bear coming into the business.
What skills do you think you had initially that kind of enabled you to have a smooth transition?
Communication skills, to be able to deal with the players themselves, because that can be a big part of your job. Communication skills and how to deal with chairmen, people who own clubs, coaches, the tea lady. Everybody at the club you've got to have some type of relationship with. So that's a big thing. But the biggest skill I think, and people ask me all the time, as a football agent, is handling rejection, because there's so much rejection in this job. Even right now, I phoned a couple of clubs today thinking this will be great, but I got rejected, and it happens nearly every day, Colin, in this business. So if you can handle rejection, that's one of the big things that I try and tell our new agents that we're teaching when we're doing our teaching part.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those first few years, what skills do you think you had to develop quite quickly? So communication and ability to deal with rejection is massively important. But in those first few years, when potentially making some mistakes and deals are not going quite as you want them to. What we having to get up to speed on very quickly.
One of the big things is learning how to what's in contracts. I think it's important that you've got to understand what's in a contract, because I made mistakes with contracts early, and you only learn from your mistakes. As we know, if you make a mistake next time, right, okay, how do I correct that the next time? And one of the biggest things that I found that I had to do was get right in deep into what was in a contract and how I could make that contract better for our players going forward. That was a big thing. I remember it took a bit of time.
What were some of the exposures early on that you were looking at in the contracts that you were like, oh, better get rid of that for the next one that I do?
Oh, just some silly things that, you maybe got wrong in contracts, maybe not getting the right term for it, the right term of how long a contract should be, maybe even getting to understand what you should be asking for, which is really a really key part of an agent, because if you're only a new agent and you're getting into a football club, you don't really know what you should be asking for. If you get that wrong, that player's not going to be happy when he sits in the dressing room next to his mate. His mate says, what, you got that? I got that from my agent, you're finished. So understanding what goes in a contract was something that we made mistakes with at the beginning. And we've made lots of mistakes throughout our 30-year career. But the clear thing is, if you make a mistake, is learning about how you rectify that for the next one. And that was something that I found that we had to learn. It took a bit of time to try and get to what's involved in the contracts. It's not just as straightforward as saying, you want to do a 2-year contract or 3-year contract at £2,000 a week or £100,000 a week. There's a big list of things that go into a contract that probably the general public don't know that we've got to learn about.
Yeah. What do you think are some of those things that the general public just have no idea whatsoever about?
Some of the things that, like, for instance, we talk quite a lot about making sure that a player's correctly insured, because some clubs have insurance but don't have the correct insurance. So if you have a bad injury, they may only pay a certain amount of the money. We always clarify that we want the full amount of insurance to be in a contract. A lot of people don't really understand what should be going in on that. The key thing is understanding the marketplace for what a player should be earning. You need to have that right. And of course, there's lots of other the general things like, should there be a car included in that? Should it be want some type of accommodation included in that? There's a number of things, but image rights is a big thing that have come into play in the last few years.
It's huge nowadays.
And if you don't understand what image rights are, then you could be in trouble. But that's really only for the players at the high end. If you've got somebody that's playing, come and sign for some Chucky Rovers, then you're not asking for image rights. So
they can post whatever they like of him on social media.
Right. These guys, we don't really too concerned about. But you're doing a big deal, and you don't understand image rights and what they're all about. And I've just done one recently. You've got to get that correct. And for me, I understand image rights, but I bring in the experts to help me with that.
Yeah, you've got a team behind you that you can plug into in terms of the different things. It's interesting you raised the insurance aspect, because I remember when Kyle Lafferty signed for Hearts initially, a lot of people were talking about the fact that his wage was super, super high. And I worked in the insurance industry at that point, and it was kind of talked about that actually Hearts had to take out an additional policy to cover the limit that Kyle was insured up to if he was going to get injured, because I think they were massively stretching their budget. And as long as he was playing and getting his appearance fees, he was going to be an expensive player for them if something went wrong with his injuries or something like that as well. So it's interesting that background you had in life assurance, it was still something that was thought about when it comes to the new job.
Well, I carried that forward because a lot of agents still don't even talk about what's involved in the insurance part. But I put it in as part of my contract to make sure, look, if the club are not insuring you, get yourself personal injury insurance, so that if you do finish your career through injury, that at least you've got some type of backup money. And that's something we are really strong about, especially with younger ones.
Yeah, exactly, because at 2021 for your first big professional contract, you're probably not thinking about, what happens if this all goes wrong and I tear a cruciate or something like that, and it's game over. You're probably thinking, right, I'm going to play here and get to the SPFL and get a move to the Premier League or whatever else like that, where you're not thinking like, if I don't keep myself fit, then what actually happens to myself, and do I go down the leagues or do I not even be able to play at all and earn a living?
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. One of the things that I was interested to ask you about contracts was like minimum release fee, clause fees and stuff like that, where, for example, if I bid £8 million for this particular player, then that the club has to accept that. That's something that we're seeing a lot more of nowadays. As an agent, is that something you always want to include as for like your better players?
Definitely, because it's a test of the club. Because if the club, you're speaking with the club and saying, look, we want to put in a clause to say that if somebody comes in and say for £5 million, And they say, no, it's 10 million. And I say, that's great. That means you rate him at a £10 million player. Well, let's pay him the £10 million wages. So that's something I always ask, Chairman. That's a wee secret. Maybe you better not be telling people that one.
Yeah, that's huge though, because you do see that. So for example, with like I think Lewis Ferguson, he's just recently moved to Italy, and a lot of people were saying, oh, when teams are bidding 4 million for him last year, he's not in a £4 million player salary at Aberdeen. So if you expect to get that amount in from him, then really should you be paying him 20, 30 grand a week, whatever it is, in terms of if that's what you class a £4 million player being paid at. So it's an interesting conversation. It probably gives you a bit more leverage as well.
It does. Interestingly, I believe in Spain, they've got to put that in the contract. So when you're doing a contract, you need to put that in to say, right, okay, if somebody comes in for a certain amount. And one of the big things they made it £1 billion so that nobody could come and buy them. So it doesn't really mean anything because nobody's going to buy a player at £1 billion. But I think it's imperative in the Spanish contracts.
Yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, it's certainly something that you're seeing more and more of. And equally, like even with like loan deals now, you're seeing like that right to buy at the end of the contract, which agents are probably quite favourable of. So if you're going to put my player away for 12 months to wherever, is he going to get an option to get a permanent move at the end of it? At least you've got that sort of progressive next step, whereas sometimes somebody goes on a loan deal and it's kind of like a lost year within their career as well.
Well, if it's a loan deal for me, then I always try to include it as a guarantee at the end of it. Okay, we'll let you go on loan, but let's talk about a guarantee fee of X amounts so that he knows he's going on loan, but if the club want him, they've got to pay this amount of money. That's something I try and encourage.
If at the agent side of the table, like a minimum release fee is like a positive thing, what are some of the things that the club will push back on, like around other contract terms? What do they want to include to give them some protection?
Coming back to the image rights, and the highest level, they want to take control of the image rights at the highest level, because if it's a real sellable guy, they want to be able to make the money more than what you do. So they push on that really big in the last few years. And of course, look, there's the general things, you've got the general arguments about what the salary is going to be, what the length of the term is going to be, and these days, I remember recently I said to somebody, of course, we'd like to include a club car. And the guy looked at me and says, getting £40,000 a week and you're asking me for a club car? To be honest, I couldn't really argue with that one. £40,000 a week, he's asking for a club car that you could probably get for £600 a month. So I says, we'll let that one go. But that used to be an old-fashioned one about asking for, the car and the house and whatever. But now they're saying, no, there's your package, get on with it.
Yeah, I'm really interested what's changed over the years in terms of like contracts. Like you say, you used to always try and get those included, but now you're really just pushing for the kind of bumper upfront fee in terms of the weekly wage.
A lot of clubs are not interested in giving accommodation or cars now because there's a lot of hassle involved with that. And they'd say, okay, we'll add in an extra amount of money to cover that. At lower levels, I'm still asking, could you help the lad out with a car because he doesn't have a car? Can you help her out with some type of somewhere to stay? Because, it's a big thing to somebody's maybe just starting out as an 18-year-old in their first contract. They're coming from abroad. They don't have a car. They don't know how to get a flat, So it's something that we ask normally at the smaller end. But at the high end, it's hard to ask that question when somebody's earning 40 grand a week or 50 grand a week.
Of course. When you're looking to move a player, then how much is like agreed beforehand? So, for example, you've got a player going from abroad, like you were telling me earlier, to a team in the SPFL, and the fees may be agreed. How much is agreed before you sit down and kind of have the back and forth?
Yeah, you should know the general amount that you're discussing, because if you're going to be miles out, there's no sense you going to the meeting. So if I'm coming to you as the chairman of a club and on the phone and I'm saying, look, we're looking for 10 grand a week, and say, look, John, no sense you turning up. Our highest wage is 5. So you've got a general feel for what before you go. You've got a general idea, and then the length of the contract. That sort of a big general discussion. Then you're at the table, anything can happen. Yeah, that's where the fighting starts.
Have you seen things move quite quickly at the table before, in terms of like your expectations have radically changed during the course of a meeting?
Especially when you see in their eyes that they're desperate for the player, then it's like, okay. Depends on who you're dealing with. Some people, you can tell in negotiation, because it's all about negotiation, and you can tell how strong they want the player, or how strong that they want to stick to their terms. Every negotiation is different. Sometimes you're going in thinking, right, this is going to be easy, and you come out going, what's happened there? Sometimes you think it's going to be difficult, and you come out going, well, that was great, because who you're dealing with, or the circumstances, or what's happening in that moment in time.
Did you have particular clubs that you had the best relationship over the years that you tend to move players a lot between, or was it a case of like very much like player led rather than club led?
No, it's about both. You know, if you've been taking good players to clubs, they want to pick up, you'll take your call. It's normal because you've given them good players. And you're picking up the phone and saying, oh, John's brought that player before, it's worked, let's have another chat with him. A lot is down to what kind of players you've got. If you've got good players, clubs will want to know you. That's basically supply and demand. That's exactly what it is. But there's lots of people that I've dealt with who have continued relationships for 30 years. And now a lot of my players are now sport directors, coaches, managers.
Well, we were saying before we hit record, Craig Moore works with you, and that would have been somebody that you dealt with when he was a kid at Rangers in the mid-90s.
17, he started with us and took him through his whole career and every club, right through from Rangers to Crystal Palace, back to Rangers, and then of course he went to the Premier League Premiership with Newcastle. Then he also went to the Bundesliga. A lot of people want to know that with Borussia Mönchengladbach with Dick Advocaat.
Yep.
And then we took him to Greece of all places, a place called Kavala, and then back to Brisbane Roar. And then he went on to be a sports director himself, worked with the FA with Ange Postecoglou, believe it or not. And then in the last 3 years, he came and worked with our agency as an agent, and he's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy with all those different countries that you cover. That's probably one of the reasons that your network's so mad. Because when we were getting prepared for this, John, you were telling me about, and I was talking to this particular individual in Romania, and I was talking to this individual in Australia. But I suppose that's probably something that builds up over time when you initially get involved with Scottish players who are going across the globe. Is that how it's built over time?
Well, for me, how it's built with all these connections is quite simple. You know, you take a player like, for instance, I looked after Gordon Petric through his career, and Gordon has just got the job as a Partizan Belgrade coach. Now, he in the Baltics, if I was ever wanting to talk to anybody in that area, he knew everybody. And everywhere he went, people followed him. Then I met all his friends, and then next thing I know, I'm in Belgrade doing business in Croatia, and I'd never even, names of clubs I'd never even heard of, because I looked after him when he came to Dundee United, and then Rangers, and then Crystal Palace, then AEK Athens and Hartson, and then eventually to China. So I've done all those deals. And then all these people, all these places, it's your job when you go to these clubs to be able to make sure you've got the contact, you keep the contact. When I went to China, I took them there. We dealt with a club there. I've kept in contact. I still deal with the people there. When I went to Athens, the owner of the club in Athens bought another club in Croatia. Dealt with him there. And then, of course, when he went to all these other different clubs, who he was speaking to became part of my network.
You're networking with the owner, the sporting director, the manager, whoever else. And of course, with football, we know these people move around as well. So you're just growing your network through that as well.
And of course, every time he played for a club, when I went to go and see him play, and then he went out for dinner after the game, all those players of that club, we get to meet all them and know who their friends are. So key part of the job is networking, and networking wherever your player goes, whoever that club is, you should be networking with everybody at that. So that's took me to all around the world, to odd countries, and dealing with places I didn't even, players and names and places I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, I think that's probably a big reason for your success in terms of across the career that you've had. You've been able to tap into so many different networks. And like you say, if you have a particular player that does move around to so many different locations, and that just expands and expands and expands. I think there's a lesson there for any profession, really, in terms of when you do well, a good job for somebody, ask them to introduce you to somebody else that does the same thing. It's what I do in my day-to-day career as well, and even for the podcast as well. If a guest has a really good experience and enjoys the conversation and sees good exposure off the back of it, then they can introduce me to somebody that they know as well. So there's lots that you can do, from doing well for somebody, and then of course asking off the back of it to get into their network.
It's the best way to go forward. And I've taught that in my past business. If you've done a good job for somebody, as soon as you finish, you say, "Excuse me, you're quite happy with what I've done? Could you recommend me one or two people who you think would want to sit down and have an informal chat with me?" And that's the same. If you take a player to a club and you do a good job and he's happy with what you've done, he's more than happy to say, "Oh, we Jimmy in the dressing room's needing a new agent." So, and that's how you get your business. But for me, there's a lot of agents who maybe are just stick to their own wee bubble in their own wee parochial area and stick to Scotland or England. But it's a world out there that you wouldn't believe who want to know you if you're a good agent.
And cliche as it sounds, football is an international language, isn't it? Like, look at the different players that you've moved that probably English isn't their first language either.
No, plenty of them, interpreters that we've had in meetings, and there's been plenty of them for sure.
What clubs have you found, and chairman, did you find kind of the most easy to deal with or the most difficult to deal with when you're bringing a player to them?
Some of them are really good. Some of them are really difficult. I've just been to doing a deal in Romania to a club called Cluj, and I dealt with the owner there, and he wasn't easy to deal with. It was a sort of a good cop, bad cop. The owner was like really difficult, but then he went out the room, and the the good guy came in, and like I've seen all that hundreds of times. I've used that tactic myself, but that was a classic. These guys are difficult to deal with. And oh no, they're good to deal with, and then difficult. Lots of clubs I've dealt with have been really good, and a lot of them change. They change hands. The owner becomes somebody else. You've got to open the door to the new owner. But there's been lots of clubs that I've had good relationships with. One in particular that I dealt with in the past who had really good time of moving players was David Murray at Rangers.
Okay.
Where he was somebody that wasn't just dealing with him in a football club sense, in life sense, because this guy had been through a real difficult time from losing his legs as a young man, and built up an empire that you wouldn't believe. Yeah. So when I went to speak to him, he was teaching me life lessons, just as much as doing deals. So he was one that I got on quite well with, and we've done a lot of business.
Murray loved transfers as well, didn't he? Like I think like if there was any like bad PR or whatever, we quite often went in and signed a new player to soothe the support. I can't remember who the guy was was it Marcus Gale or something? I think we signed on a whim, and I think he played about 3 games and then he was back out the door as well. But that was before transfer windows, so I wonder how, because you would have operated well before that period. How did that change things?
We were just talking about that yesterday, actually. I'm talking about another agency, and we called it the good old days where you could be doing a deal every day.
Yeah.
Now we're in certain sectors and areas, but believe it or not, what a lot of people maybe not pick up is you can actually do after the 31st of August, the European transfer window. A lot of other countries open. There's what transfer
windows. Their seasons run different times,
yes.
Of course.
So if you're really clever, you can map out throughout the year how you can do business throughout the whole year, which we do. So when, for instance, when the European window finishes, we're into the Middle East, where Saudi Arabia and Dubai and Qatar.
You start running in a different time zone at that point, different sleep pattern.
So plenty of them, waking up during the night. Phone's on full time during the night, and I don't know how many times my wife says, "No, you got to switch it off. Come on."
How did the transfer window change things, though? I appreciate you've got like a different times that you can do things, but before that you could have moved the player quite quickly. Do you think it meant that players have been more settled at clubs and more relaxed about moving, or do you think they're always eyeing up the next move?
In the funny chat, it was a player and an agent. We were just sitting talking about that. It was a player that brought it across quite well when he's saying, you're sitting and you've got a team that's been playing for 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the next thing where did Big Bully go? Big Bully's away. Then somebody else comes in, and then 2 weeks later somebody else is away and somebody else comes in. So there was never like a settled squad at most clubs. And that was just the way it was. You just accepted that. You could be moving on, or somebody picks up the phone and you're like, or to me, John, we really like your player. Do you think he would come to our club? And then you try and get the club together, and it was all about money. If the money was right, then they agreed a deal and he was off. So it was that you could do the business every day, but again, it's a bit more restricted now. But if you're clever, you can still do that. Worldwide.
Across the world, exactly that. And that's why like one of the terms you used was not staying within your goldfish bowl or within your kind of little pond that you can work in. You have like an international network, so of course you can operate at different times of the year and earn during these different times as well, rather than just the summer and the January window.
Definitely. That's the part where I feel sorry for the guys that just say, right, okay, I'm from Scotland, I'm only in that marketplace, or the UK or Europe even, because if they don't have or don't build these international contacts, then they're restricted to doing business, in Scotland or England or in Europe. They can't do anything out with that because they don't know where to go to sell their players. So, or to buy players, or even do business. So for me, when I'm trying to teach people, I'm saying, look, open up the doors worldwide. Go out your way to speak to clubs and chairmen and owners and sports directors in Outer Mongolia or France or Australia or Serbia, because they'll want to speak to you. If you get the right people, they'll speak to you. Yeah. And if you've opened up a door, when the window finishes in 31st of August in Europe, you're talking to somebody in Qatar.
I think that's a huge lesson that you can teach the mentees that you bring on, because you've gone and done it as well. Like, it's always nice to say, like, somebody practices what they preach, so to speak, and for you to have operated across the world probably gives them reassurance that, yes, I'm based here in Scotland, or yes, I'm based in France, but of course I can operate in these different jurisdictions as long as I take a professional approach and I know how to handle myself. I can be a valuable kind of middleman for these guys. You were mentioning there you got on well with David Murray when it came to like transfers in, but do you feel you're almost at loggerheads a little bit with the club sometimes in terms of when you're financially incentivized to move a player?
What do you mean by that?
So if you would benefit from a player leaving the club, does the chairman think, right, you behave yourself? Yes, you've brought me Craig Moore back from Crystal Palace, but don't you dare try and move Petrix or whoever it is.
We've had that. And what you've got to do, what's right. It's not the club that matter if you're doing your job right. If you're working for the player, it doesn't matter. I don't care if David Murray or whoever the owner said, sorry, that you shouldn't be affected by that. You represent the player, and if he wants to fall out with you over that, that's showbiz. For me, we always went first for the player, what was right for the player, and if the chairman wanted to shout off or the owner or whatever, let it be. If you're really good, they'll come back because you've got the right players and you'll have that relationship. They actually respect the fact that you're actually working for it solely for their player, unless you're working for the club alone, which has happened. You know, we get asked to go and do business for the club alone. That's a different story,
of course.
But if a chairman said to me, "Great, we've just done business with that player. You brought him back, and you're trying to sell that player," and I'm saying, "But that player wants to go because he doesn't want to be with you," I represent the player, no you. Sorry. And we've had many an argument with that with lots of different clubs. But it's the player comes first.
That respect piece is huge, though, isn't it? Because if you folded over that, or you kind of bowed to their whim on that, then what else might you flake on?
You're finished with it. That club then controls you.
Yeah, that's huge, isn't it? And interestingly, that will go around the dressing room as well, because in the same way that you were saying that the player will say to wee Jimmy in the dressing room who plays next to him, "Oh, John's just done me a great deal to move here," or "He's just helped me out with my contract negotiation," then you end up with him as a client. In the same way, he says something else and he says, "Well, actually, my agent was really strong with the club over this particular thing," and of course he then moves.
That's how it works, Colin. If they think that you're totally behind them and not being bullied by, and you get some, maybe the word you shouldn't be using, bullied, but being influenced,
pushed around,
influenced by the owner, because of course they've got lots of power, because you need to be able to talk to them to do business. Another deal, you might be phoning him 2 weeks from now and saying, "Hey, I've got Colin here, what a player he is," and he's like, no, you took our player out here, wee man. You have to be able to manage that.
Yeah.
And for me, if you stand up to them, they respect you. But as soon as you say, "Oh no, okay, then we won't move the player," you're finished.
One of the deals when I was doing my research, John, that you were involved in was Lee McCulloch from Wigan to Rangers back in 2007. It would have been
2007.
Yeah, so
right. Well remember that. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago, because it was right before Rangers run to Manchester, because Lee was a big part of that.
Yeah.
But that was drawn out across the whole summer. What was it like being involved in that?
That was a long transfer. It basically came because Lee wanted to get back to back home and obviously play for Rangers, who he supported, and that was a request that we wanted to get involved. He wanted to get involved with us, and he did, to try and take him back to Rangers. But Wigan weren't having it because he was doing really well for Wigan. He's a big name, the top player. I remember Paul Jewell. Paul Jewell was like, "Yeah, he ain't going anywhere." So he ain't going anywhere, and David Murray and Walter Smith are saying, "No, we want him, John. Come on, let's see how good you are." It was one of those jobs, a challenge. But more importantly, it was more about that Lee wanted to go to Rangers, back to Rangers, not back to Rangers from Wigan. And as I say, I had more than one ding dong with the manager of Wigan, just thinking to myself, this ain't going to happen. So we went back and forward, and it got to the level where I think the manager, Paul Jewell, realised the player really does want to go back. It wasn't just a let's make money or whatever. He wanted to go back to his hometown or Glasgow and play for the team he supported. But it took a long time. And it's funny. It's funny you should say that. Just something just came to my mind about. I was at a special dinner in the Glasgow city centre. I'm sitting next to Walter Smith. I said, "Great, this is the time for Walter and I to have a real chat."
You'll be in his ear, John.
Oh, I was like, he doesn't know what's hitting him here. But to be fair, it was reciprocal, because he's like, "How are we going to get this done? What's in your mind? What's in your mind, Walter?" And we get that carried away with a couple of beers. my friend who the dinner we were at was actually for President Bill Clinton, who was in Glasgow. There was this big special dinner. We were at sort of a top table type thing, and everybody was getting a picture taken with Bill Clinton. And my friend who organised it, a good friend, big Rangers supporter, a guy called Sati Singh, he came up to me and says, Johnny, you need to go. The special services are waiting on you and Walter to get your picture taken with Bill Clinton. I says, listen, I'm trying to sell Lee McCulloch. He went, just stay there, don't worry about the picture. So to this day, he still talks to me about it, about how we were only two that were left at this table chatting about taking Lee, because the two were really intense about it, that we missed the picture with Bill Clinton.
More important matters at hand.
More important was getting the deal done, and especially Sati saying to me, just stay there, forget about
exactly.
the picture.
Big Rangers man as well. He'd be incentivized to make that happen too. No, I love that. And it does show that, of course, there's times where the player's interests are that he wants to move to that club, but that club's got a pulling factor as well, doesn't it? In terms of that's Lee's boyhood team that he's always wanted to play for. Like Walter Smith coming back after the kind of Le Guin experiment going wrong. Yeah. It was a huge pull, and Lee was a huge part of not only the kind of the run to Manchester, but the league titles in the 3 years after that. And then, of course, when Rangers went down the divisions, he was kind of like a bit of a kind of a rallying figure for the support during that. So it's certainly a move that you can, like, Wigan could probably look a wee bit more calmly now and say, well, it was the right move for him.
Great player, great guy, Big Lee. And we were just so happy when we got the call to say, right, you're in. It's and, done. That's one of the beautiful things about this game is that, when you're trying so hard to get something done for a player who really wants, and then you realise you've got it over the line, and the joy that comes out of from a player. And of course, for us, it's business, but it's more important that the player's sitting saying, you know what, you've put in this time and effort and all the fights and all the arguments and all the conversations with Wigan, which was really difficult, but funny as well. And what'd you call it? We're on the phone to Lee. What did he say today? What did he say? What's going on? Walter, what's happening?
David Murray. You training with the under-20s?
Oh, there's all sorts went on. But eventually we got it done. And the satisfaction that comes with this job, everybody thinks it's all about money. But the satisfaction is to pick up the phone and say, Lee, get your bags packed. Come up, you're signing for Rangers. And then you can just feel the excitement and the joy coming through that phone. And that's something that's fantastic in this business.
Yeah, what a high. If that's a massive high, John, what's a deal that maybe didn't go as well as you wanted that you can share with us?
Plenty of them, I've been in situations where you think you've got the deal's done and over the line, and you don't get I feel a medical or the club don't agree terms, and you're in a situation that, wow, I've just spent a long time trying to get this over the line and it's not happening, and you go back to falling out with yourself and going under the bed for about a couple of hours, and then you have to pick yourself up and go back.
You were saying about the rejection piece is one of the skills, communication, and then ability to handle rejection. So being thick-skinned and having multiple experiences of that one went a little bit wrong is probably what's built your successful career as well.
Well, yeah, when somebody says no to me, it doesn't bother me. I just think I'm getting closer to the next yes. And that's something I've learned in this business, that when I'm picking up a phone, and just this week I've been trying to sell a player and thinking this guy will be quite easy to sell when I'm getting lots of no's. But in the past I used to come off and go, oh, no, they don't want him. But now I'm just saying, right, okay, I've got another 6 clubs to call or 10 clubs. I'm getting closer to somebody saying yes, and it's a psychological thing. I know to me now that's just a closer to a yes. It's the way I operate.
Yeah, it's a good way to frame things. You mentioned failing medicals. Were you involved in the Hartson to Rangers transfer?
I was John Hartson. We the day before transfer deadline, I brought him up and work. I was working for Rangers, and he says, "Look," I said, "What about this player? I love him. Dick Advocate, I love him." Brought him up, and that was one of the most disappointing deals ever, because everything was going swimmingly well. Dick Advocate was absolutely delighted that we had him in the boardroom. Got him in the boardroom. The deal was done in 15, 20 minutes. I always remember it was there with his father and myself. Everything was looking great, and then he went for the medical, and the Dutch doctor at the time just didn't think his knee was right enough to go and play for Rangers, and I remember him going, telling him that it wasn't going to go ahead, and it was horrible for him and us as well. And he went back down south. I think it was at Coventry at the time, and it was really horrible how all that came about. But I remember rejection myself, because I worked hard to pull all this together and talk to all the parties, and it was all.
He's bought in, Rangers are bought in.
Everybody bought in. And I remember that, like, this came back to me. I remember that after it didn't happen, John left, and then all the press left and everything. And I remember going down into the Rangers dugout, and it was a real rainy day. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, what happened there, man? That was just a big deal and a lot of business. And I thought, and I looked up, and then the rain was coming down, and the big Rangers sign, and I went, you know what? Because somebody else wants to come to Rangers a day, up and at it again.
Of course.
Because if you let that get you down, then that'd be you finished. And that's the part went, right, that was in the past. I can't control. They've knocked him back because he had a medical. Let's just move on to the next one.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because he went on to have such a good career at Celtic, and Rangers signed Ron de Boer, who albeit had a good Rangers career, there were still a number of injuries within it, which if you were being really strict in a medical, you wonder if Hartson would have been just as fit as De Boer during the period as well.
It would have been, because he came to Celtic and done a magnificent job. So in fact, John and I were speaking at a thing just a few months ago, and John didn't know anything about the difference really between Celtic and Rangers at that time, so it didn't really mean, he was just like, well, it's a massive club. Got knocked back, Celtic take him on board, and he went on to, now he loves Celtic, he done a massive job, he scored all those goals, it was fantastic. So who was right or wrong in that stage?
Yeah, the medical team.
Well, you said it, not me.
Yeah, as a Rangers fan, I loved De Boer, but I had a grudging respect for Hartson in terms of what he was able to accomplish for Celtic up front. He was a very, very good player. What were some of the other deals that you were involved in? Does anything stand out as kind of like the biggest deal, for example, or something like that?
I always remember, and I've discussed this recently, was when I brought Christian CamBro. You've heard of Christian CamBro?
Striker?
No, he was a midfielder. He was at Real Madrid.
Oh, Middlesbrough.
To Middlesbrough.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
So I'd done that deal with Christian. Christian's a great lad. And talk about keeping your connections. He's now the sporting director at Olympiacos. So just last week, I'm speaking to him about players at Olympiacos, and his owner owns Nottingham Forest. So we've been speaking in a triangle, and that's a way back from when I took him to. We've kept in contact, and I was seen him in Greece very recently. But that was a very interesting deal, because it's taking somebody from Real Madrid to the Premiership at that time. Sorry, and that was a big deal. It wasn't the biggest financial deal, but it was something really special, because we were dealing with Real Madrid, which the first time I dealt with them. I dealt with Middlesbrough lots of times. The owner there's a guy called Steve Gibson. He's a lovely guy. So that was one that sticks in my mind for lots of reasons. Because it was mainly dealing with Real Madrid, dealing with Christian himself, who's a great lad, World Cup winner, Champions League winner, World Cup winner with France, Champions League winner, and you're thinking, what, you're coming to Middlesbrough? But he wanted to try England. That was his dream. And then there was another massive reason why that was a big deal, because his wife was the most beautiful woman in the world at the time, and everybody wanted to know more about her, Adriana, and what they did about Christian.
Asking you if you can introduce them.
Hello, John, how's it going? You brought that player from Middlesbrough to Middlesbrough, yeah? What about Adriana?
Yeah, brilliant. So we've talked about transfers, and I'd like to know a little bit more about contract negotiations as well, because like when some of these deals coming up, or like a lot of people at the moment, if you're a Rangers fan at the time of recording, we're talking about Morelos in the last year of his deal, and Ryan Kent as well. People are focused on, they've got 1 year left in the deal, they might have to get sold, or they have to get extended, or are they going to play on through the last year? When's the kind of trigger points within a contract that you're normally saying, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, can we have a chat, please?
I normally start talking 2 years before. I think that's a prudent time for everybody to be talking. The last year, you might have lost the momentum to make money from him. So 2 years to go, I normally chat with Owen and say, right, do you want to renew, or do you want to sell him? If you want to renew, great, let's sit at the table. Or if you want to sell him, let's get speaking to sell him. And for me, that's just pure common sense. Because why would you go into the last year with a player where it should be speaking to, it should be common sense with clubs? And it amazes me that clubs let contracts go to the last year. Yeah. That you should be sitting down, or he should be phoning me, chairman, saying, right, John, your player's got 2 years to go. Can we have a chat? Should we be renewing them, or should we be going to the marketplace to sell them?
Yeah, it's interesting. How do you manage players' expectations at that point as well? Because sometimes there's sometimes a gap between what they maybe think they could go and play for, and what the club think they could go and play at, I suppose.
And that's a big thing. Managing players' expectations is one of the most difficult part of the job, because I have players who think they can play for Real Madrid, but really they can only really play for Stirling Albion. No disrespect to Stirling Albion, but anyhow, every player's different. But in general, managing the expectations of players, and it's difficult. But it's good if a player's saying, I think I'm good enough for the Premiership, and that's good because you've got that ambition, you love it. But when really you're lucky if you can get to League One, so you have to be able to sit down and manage that expectation.
Yeah, have you found that that's harder with younger players and more experienced players? At what point in their career are they the most difficult to manage in terms of where they want to go?
Because when they get to the level of maybe getting a wee bit of success and they've got ahead of themselves, you maybe take them to a Premier League in Scotland. They're doing really well. They're thinking, am I going to England? And maybe only played 5 games in the Premier League, because they get carried away a wee bit. And it's our job to sit down and, as I say, manage their expectations.
And again,
and the marketplace tells you a lot about a player. If a player has played 100 games in the Premier League in Scotland and he's done really well, the marketplace will tell you, because the clubs will be phoning you. And it's not about my opinion. It's not always about his or the clubs. When you're getting 5, 10 clubs calling you about a player, you know that he's ready for that league. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah, the market will dictate, because I think a lot of people, for example, like as football fans, we put really subjective values on players. So again, Rangers fans, so these examples come easiest to me, John. But Aribo moved for like 6 million plus some add-ons, and a lot of Rangers fans were saying, "Well, how's he moved for that? If Bassey's moved for 25, and Aribo is potentially a more developed player at this stage of his career, he's a bit more, he's scored more goals, he's played a bit more." But ultimately, there was the contract situation, there's the potential, and there's what the clubs are willing to pay as well, based on their circumstances. So I find it interesting as an agent, you'll be like, well, of course, that transfer, there was a big delta between the fees that were paid because of these factors and these factors, whereas us as fans are a bit more, oh, well, we watch them on the pitch every week and we think they're worth this.
Listen, I'm a fan myself, and sometimes I look and say, wow, how's he not moving for X amounts of money myself? But it's not the fans that make a decision. It's not even sometimes the clubs, the Rangers situation. It's who was coming in for Aribo. That's who's making the decisions. Because if nobody's coming in for your player, then there's no marketplace for him, and he's not worth anything. That's what people don't. It's like when you try to sell a house and nobody's about to buy it, you're thinking, wow, nobody wants to buy my house. I thought it was worth £1 million. Nobody wants to buy it. It's not really worth, it's not going to move for anything. So the marketplace determines where players go on a lot of occasions, and that's down to how well they do.
Yeah, player expectations is a big thing that I guess maybe you're teaching the agents that you're bringing on through your academy, in terms of like how to have these harder conversations, because I suppose like you're a very friendly guy, John, so I could see you being like the player's best pal, but you can also see you like switch to be like business mode, and I suppose you teaching that on to your students in terms of how they can conduct themselves is probably a big part of your coaching journey.
When I'm teaching people, it's a fine line. Don't get too close to them, because then it's difficult to tell them the truth. You've got to be very careful about that. But if I become very friendly with you and you've had a shit game, it's difficult to say that. But the most important thing I tell them is you need to be honest. And if somebody's saying, look, I think I'm ready for the Premiership, say, well, look, if you feel you're not, because the marketplace is not determinate, you need to be honest with them. And it's something, the biggest thing that we teach people is be honest with your player. Because too many agents or their friends that are around about them will say, oh, you've done great today, or you're doing great. They don't get the real truth, because it's difficult for their parents to say, you had a crap game. Their best mate who's at the game, don't worry, you were great. When really, we all know he had a terrible game. As an agent, you've got to be honest with me. You're maybe not going to say he had a terrible game, but you're going to be more honest with them rather than people who are surrounded by, get into that bubble of people telling them all the good things. As an agent, you've got to be brutally honest and tell them how it is. And managing their expectations, as we said before, Colin, is quite simple. Don't promise them the world, because if you get in and say, look, I want to work with you and I'm going to be able to take you to Arsenal within 3 years, you don't know that pathway. All you can do is say, I'll be with you during this journey, and I'll take you where what you do on the pitch. Because when people say to me, oh, John, you're great, you took players to here, there, everywhere. I didn't take them anywhere. They took themselves. Oh, I give them options. They have to do it in the pitch first. If Colin's playing for Rangers and wants to get to Arsenal, Colin, you need to do it in the pitch. You need to be fit. You need to eat the right stuff. You need to look after yourself. Because I can't take you to Arsenal if you ain't doing a job here. I can get you the options, but really it's you that gets the move.
Yeah, I think that's vital, and it's really interesting how you're able to bring all these phrases roll off your tongue, John, because you've probably said them so many times. But I guess that's where your expertise is helping bring through the next generation of agents who are not quite sure how to have that conversation, and maybe a wee bit too chummy, or maybe they're a wee bit too harsh, because you'll probably have agents that are just can't build the personal connection because they're always just thinking about the numbers or the reality of things. One of the things I was really keen to ask you was, one of the things a lot of fans in Scotland bemoan is this kind of transition period between like academy to senior football. We seem to lose so many talents during that period. Like, think about all the next big things that we've had that have maybe not come into fruition. What role do you think an agent can play in those kind of stages where a player's finishing their academy career and doing their first professional contract?
Well, that's a really important question, by the way, because there used to be in the past, during the period of when kids were 17 or 18, they were getting into reserve leagues. That's not there anymore. So you had that period of 17 or 18 of saying, right, we're going to play in reserve. And I'll take an example for when I looked after Charlie Miller, if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Of course you have, because he's a brilliant, famous player, right? And Charlie always talks about the difference between academy players and, try to make it into the first team. He was playing alongside guys like John Browns of this world and real men at 17, and he's going, or 16 and 17, he's going, wow, But the academy guys don't have that reserve league where at 17, 18, they can be thrown in and playing. They're playing against other academy teams, so it's difficult to then take them from 18 into the first team. Whereas down in England, they've got to be a better set up like that. But that's changed dramatically, and it's for me, when they get to a certain age, it's difficult because there's nowhere to take them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because they're not going at 18. A lot of them are not going straight into the first team. They might need another 2 or 3 years of development, and that's when you've got to look at where age to come in. It's a really, really important point. Right? Okay, you might not be able to make it to this first team, but I tell you what, I'll go and take you somewhere. Maybe you might have to take a step back into the second division in Scotland to get yourself playing with men in a real league where these guys are playing for their mortgage, because their bonus might mean their mortgage, right? That you get in amongst that, and then you know what the job's all about, and then that will help benefit you to go to play for another first team. So there's that gap, which I'm sure you know about.
Yeah, so the agent has to have that conversation where, yes, you're at Rangers, Celtic, or Dundee United or Hearts just now, but would you develop if you went to a Cowdenbeath or a Peterhead or something like that and got first team football and played against men? Because of course you're not going to break in at Celtic or Rangers or even Hearts or Dundee United up front when they're paying that guy 20, 30 grand a week, where you're a kid and you need to cut your teeth and score some goals somewhere else.
It's very difficult. One of the biggest questions when I'm talking to clubs, especially in England, and they're thinking, right, John, you look after these guys at Celtic or Rangers, whatever it may be, is how many games have you played? I would rather Celtic said, or Rangers or Aberdeen or whatever, said, tell you what, we'll keep that player for another 2 years, loan him out to somewhere to see if he makes it. If he plays 30, 40 games, he might come and be able to play for Rangers first team, but also he might be able to go somewhere in England. And a great example of that is that Hamilton went through a period of playing players that played 60, 70, 80 first team games. He was much more of a sellable asset than the young guy. It may have been a better player at Rangers because he'd played 70 or 80 games at Hamilton. And they've done fantastically well.
That's a huge point. We had James McCarthy, James MacArthur, and even like Brian Easton, players like that as well. They were all more valuable, like you say, because they had either championship or SPL experience.
So it's a difficult situation if you're 18 and you've got the choice of saying, right, should I've had the choice to stay on it to Rangers or Celtic or one of the bigger clubs, or would I go and take a chance of playing for a year with another club, get 20, 30 games on my belt, become a more established player? And then people from down south will say, well, I would rather take that guy that's played the 30 games than the boy that still continue to play at the under 19s or whatever it may be. But there is a big role to be played by agents there, by having the contacts to be able to say, right, we can take you from there to there.
Yeah.
You with me?
Yeah, completely with you. I think the Rangers B and Celtic B, and I think Hearts B now playing in the Lowland League is a step in the right direction. But like you say, you're still seeing those players go on loan. So I know from Rangers B Tony Weston and one of the centre mids, his name escapes me, both had good seasons last year in the Lowland League, but they're on loan at Partick Thistle this year, so they're playing first team real men's football because they've had that year cutting their teeth, and they'll be more valuable to Rangers or whoever wants to buy them next year because they've done that. And I suppose their agent probably had to have that conversation to say, I want my player going out on loan, or I want some reassurances at the end of this loan deal that my player maybe gets a move here or is going to get exposure to the first team squad off the back of it as well.
And it doesn't have to be, Colin, that you're talking about connections and what an agent should be doing. Somebody that's got the connections in the business shouldn't be just talking about Scotland. You know, we've got players, I'm picking up the phone to the second division in England and saying, look, this boy probably could do a job for you. And again, these are decent levels, second division, first division, Division 1, and taking them down there as well. And that's all about connections. I'm not saying I'm any better than anybody, but I've just been around the block a few times. And I know a lot of the people in all these leagues. So an agent that's got those connections that can take them down south as well, rather than saying, right, I'm parochial. Or, by the way, let's talk about taking them abroad. Why wouldn't you think about taking them somewhere if they were game enough? Because I'm really a real top advocate of saying, okay, why don't you go and try another country to see whether you can cut your teeth in another country? And as you can see now, there's been a connection with Italy, with Lewis Ferguson and other players going to Italy.
Aaron Hickey, I think, went from Hearts, and then he's back in the Premier League now, I think. So that's worked very well for him.
There you go. So when I started, if you say to somebody, you want to go to another country, they'd be like, and out of England, they would have been scared. But nowadays, it's part of life that you should be looking. And I agree, you're a great advocate that you should be looking at other countries to take them rather than just saying, okay, let's take you to Peterhead or whatever it might be.
No, you're a fountain of knowledge on this stuff, John. And one of the things that we were keen to speak about was, obviously, I've hinted at it throughout, that you coach and mentor people to become agents now. But you were saying about 100 grand back in the day was the bond you needed to have with FIFA, and put that in for 5 years until you got that back.
Yeah.
But the rules on that all changed, 2015, where it became a much easier industry to enter. But of course, you can have like a really low entry point to an industry, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a success in that industry just because the entry point's a lot lower. But the John Viola Academy is like the kind of the gold standard now that you're holding up in terms of, like, you can show people how to manage this process and learn from all your years of experience. How have you found that process in terms of sharing everything that's in here, putting it onto paper and into all these courses that you run?
You know, the start of that, it was really interesting, Colin. It was people started asking us, you know, I would love to be an agent. I don't know how to do it. Because when the floodgates opened in 2015, when everybody and anyone could become an agent, you could sign a form today, and within 2 days you're a football agent, as long as you want to pay, I think it's a £500 fee to England.
It's a little bit of a reduction from the 100 grand.
Exactly, it certainly is. But what we found was a lot of people were doing that, and they don't have the knowledge. They're like, right, okay, I'm an agent now, but you know, this is a difficult business to understand and to navigate through. So myself and my son and my nephew, nephew's my partner, Phil McTaggart, we decided, why don't we write a course about how to be a football agent for a bit of fun? And it just went through the roof. The whole world started buying this course because people want to know, what's the job all about? I'd like to get involved with it. I've just put my name forward to be an agent, but I don't know where to go. So we put all our knowledge down in this course, and it was great fun because we were sitting saying, so if we're going to recruit a player, what do you do, Phil? Well, what would you do? And then we wrote it all down.
We talk you through it, yeah.
Aye, and then if you were going to go and do a contract, what's the first thing you think about? If you're going to go and speak to a chairman, how do you phone that chairman? What do you have your notes in front of you? How do you approach him? And if you're going to go and sign a player, how do you sign him? If you're going to get a contract, what's in that contract? So we had a great fun. It took us about 6 months to write this course, but then we put it in a proper format and we put it out there. And next thing we know, the whole world was looking at it. And so much so that, believe it or not, somebody that done our course, a guy called Vincent English, and I have to give him great credit, he's a professor at Cambridge University, phoned me up, said, John, I've just done your course, it's magnificent, I'm professor, my name's Vincent English. I thought it was a wind-up. I said, very good.
You probably get some wind-up calls in terms of
plenty of
such and such the Real Madrid.
Plenty of them. And I thought it was a wind-up. He says, no, he says, I'm a professor at Cambridge University. I'd like to talk to you about taking your course into a master's degree in an MBA. I mean, very good. But believe it or not, that was 3 years ago. And now we have had people who have got a master's degree in the football intermediary business and an MBA. And it's been absolutely magnificent. They say that we were the first people in the world to develop a master's degree and an MBA in football intermediary, and nobody else has matched it yet. So we're taking it from sitting around a table saying, hey, man, we'll show people how to do this business, to now we've got people around the world who do our normal pro course, which is just a 16 module online course, to doing online mentoring, to doing personal mentoring, to doing events, to being in a situation now we've got a master's degree, and it opens doors worldwide for us, because it's not just the fact that you do the course. If you're doing the course and you're from Venezuela or Germany or France, you're talking to us about business as well. So it's opened up avenues that we never knew existed, and it's been magnificent.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think football's such a, like we were saying, an international language, and people are so passionate about it. I think it would be quite easy to maybe get carried away and think, right, I'm going to become a football agent. But if you go in blind, you could get burnt, and you won't win a client within the first year or 2 years. So of course you're not even going to wash your face in terms of covering your costs. So it is it's one of those ones where you're better to seek out some advice and education to give yourself a fighting chance, because I don't think it's not going to come easy to everybody. Like, you had a little bit of a network to start with in terms of arranging their life policies. So of course you were able to say, yeah, like, I'm happy to work with you on a football agency basis. Whereas some people will come from a background that has no level of like experience with those kind of conversations. So it's much harder for them to make the entry in. So having a step-by-step process and something they can go through and even do an MBA in is a fantastic resource for them.
But we teach them, Colin, from scratch, as if they don't have any connections. And we've got a young guy who, I'll mention his name because we love him. His name's Jordan Allen. And he's only 24, he's from Weymouth. And he came in and said, right, I'm going to be a football agent. I want to be a football agent. I want to do your course. Done the course. Came on to our online mentoring. Took a full mentoring package with us and learned that. And within his first month, done a deal abroad in Cyprus. Couldn't believe it, right? And now Jordan's just at the level, he's been about 18 months now. He's about to leave his job. And his job is just a customer, he's a customer service manager.
But he's not passionate about that in the way that he is about football agency. No, exactly.
He does his job, and then fair play to him, he's 95 in his job. But as soon as he gets home, he's on the football agency, and every Saturday he's at games. Every Tuesday and Wednesday nights he's at games. He's putting his heart and soul into it. But here's somebody who didn't have one connection in football, who's now done a lot of deals. Now, albeit there's not a Cristiano Ronaldo deal, but he's done deals enough that he's very close to be able to leave that profession to come into this one. And that's the kind of stories where, people don't understand. It is a very, very difficult job, but there's a positive side to it as well. More will fail, and that's just life. But he's one of the success stories, and there's plenty of them. We've got people around the world who have come into our courses and who have become successful and done big deals.
Yeah, in terms of stuff going around the world as well, one of the questions I need to ask you is around like work permits and things like that as well. How's that changed with things like Brexit in recent years? Has that made it more difficult for you to move
really
players?
Difficult. A couple of years ago or 18 months ago, whenever Brexit was, if you were from France or Sweden or Holland or Germany, you just walk in, European Union, and you can get a job. These guys can't come here anymore. There's a good side to that for the young Scots, because in England, if you were Manchester United, Man City or whatever, you just went round wherever you wanted in the world, in particular Europe, and you could pick up a young player. Can't do that anymore. They can't walk in. It's very, very difficult. So they're now looking at Ireland, Wales, Scotland. So it's good for us, that particular part. But it's really difficult because all the connections we had in Europe, where we were bringing players, your average players from Sweden, your average player from Denmark, your average player from Spain into the UK, can't do it anymore. They just can't get in unless they're at a certain level.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was burning in the back of my head, because even like thinking like when I would have played Football Manager as a kid, the work permit was always the thing that you needed to get over the line towards the end, particularly players from outside of Europe. But then European Union, of course, meant super easy movement of players. But that's interesting. It opens up more opportunities for your players internally to.
But I tell you where it has been a benefit, like Brazilian players and Argentinian players. Believe it or not, the average Argentinian and Brazilian player can come here now, whereas before Brexit, he couldn't. And it's to do with a point system. So it's more beneficial for Brazilians and Argentinians to come here who couldn't do it a couple of years ago, for that works for them.
Yeah.
But your average European can't get in here.
They've given with one hand but taken away with the other. No, it's
It's based on it's based on what country you play football. If you play in France, Germany, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, and you get so many points for playing in that league. So if you're just a player that's only played a few games in Argentina, then you get so many points that go towards your work permit.
The chance to move.
And you've got the chance to come in. Whereas before Brexit, you had no chance. You had to be an international.
One of the questions I always like to ask high performers within their space is, what's something that you feel that you've actually mastered now?
From being an agent.
Yeah.
I keep saying it. The fact that rejection doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Yep.
You know, I
Resilience, I suppose.
Resilience as well. You know, because I see all these young agents out there, and you know, when they learn how to take rejection and be resilient, they'll be successful at a certain level. That's something I've mastered that I didn't really have at the beginning.
Yeah.
I've mastered that, and I've also mastered about not worrying about what people say or think about you, because you get good and bad everywhere.
Well, I was going to say, football agents, they're obviously much more popular than traffic wardens, but with some clubs, they probably have a bit of a bee in their bonnet about them for particular things. Because we were saying there about like your conversation with David Murray, you'd be really pleased you brought somebody, but you'll be saying, don't you dare take him, for example. So I suppose that you've got to have a thick skin in terms of what people say about you.
I remember very well a long time ago, there was a big double page spread about an owner of a club saying agents are this, they hate them, they're the scum of the earth, or this. I could go in and use some expletives, right? And then I'm reading this story and I'm saying, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting, blah, 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 blah. In fact, I was reading the story and my phone, my secretary says, so-and-so is on the phone. It was a guy I was reading the story about, the owner. All right, take a call. She says, can you help me now? We're looking for a centre forward, John. And I'm like, I'm just reading a thing about. She says, that's for the papers. So, bottom line is, we do get a lot of brunt of the stick. Like any industry, there's good and bad. There's agents that are taking the piss out of people. There are agents that are unscrupulous. There are agents, but there's some really great guys out there. Some people really doing a great job. It's just unfortunate that you guys only hear about the bad ones.
Oh, that makes headlines, doesn't it?
Of course, that makes
It
headlines.
lets the chairman have a rant.
Of course, you know, we're the bad guys, but some great agents out there doing great jobs for their players who are looking after them, who are brutally honest, who are putting in time and effort that you would not believe. And I've seen them because I've been teaching them. You know, boys that are driving 3 hours to go and see their player playing, picking them up, you know, and spending time when they're injured. The part that you don't see in a job.
Yeah, that's a huge point, isn't it? Because yes, you're involved in the high-flying transfer and the new contract negotiation or getting them the move to the team that he's always wanted to play for. But also there's the time when he's injured and he's maybe worried about, am I going to get a new deal or whatever else? And that's when you need to be a support network for them as well.
Definitely. And that's the part the public only see the guy turning up, doing the deal in Sky Sports. But they don't know that's maybe took years to get there. They don't know the pain and the heartache and the time that he spent with that player, but he's maybe not earned any money.
Of course, yeah.
And there's lots of young agents who spend time with players and they leave them and they don't earn any money. So there's a lot in the background that people don't see. The public only see the tip of the iceberg.
The iceberg, yeah, I was going to say that's a great analogy for that. So if you've mastered things like resilience and the ability to be quite thick-skinned and not handle rejection, and be able to handle rejection, what's something that you feel you're still working on even after 30 years in the industry?
Nothing, I'm brilliant.
The Glaswegian gala streaks shining through there.
No, I'm still working on it. That's quite interesting. I tell you, one of the things I'm trying to work about is try to get my own time. I'm trying to, you know, like, if somebody's trying to get a hold of me, I'm taking time away for the family. You know, I'm trying to say, right, okay, now's the time I should be spending with my family because I've spent so much time putting my whole life into this football industry. One of the things I'm trying to do is to say, right, okay, switch your phone off.
I was going to say the boundaries with your phone, you said that stays on beside your bedside at night.
It does, actually, still does. But I've put it off for this chat, by the way, you're lucky.
That's it, we've got an hour without any calls. You'll have some messages off this.
For sure.
Because we're still in the transfer window at the time of speaking as well, aren't we? So it's probably all go.
It is all go.
We need to be careful where we signpost people, John, because when I Google John Viola, do you know who else comes up?
Tell me.
the host of the Italian American podcast and a leading member of the Italian American community. He's the chairman of some society in the US.
Is that right?
He was like the third or fourth result. You're higher up than him, don't worry. But there's some other people that are called John Viola that have got a social media presence.
Is that right? So, that's another,
Not in football agency though, which is good.
I think I'm the only John Viola football agent. I think if there's another one out there, I'd like you to meet him.
Yeah, exactly that. But John, where would you like to send people towards to continue the conversation with you?
If people try to learn about the football agents business, we have a website called jivacademy.co.uk. That tells you everything about what we've done and what we're doing for people to try to get them to a level to become a football agent. And one of the interesting things that people say, "Oh, so John, is that you teaching people as part of your business?" Of course, yes, we are. It's a small part of our business, but I'm at the sharp end. These guys are phoning me saying, "Oh, this guy said this." I said, "Stop! I just got that as well today." So I'm at the sharp end and having to learn with a business changing dramatically as you go along. People think, "Oh, God, you're 38 years in the business, you know everything." For instance, our young agents are learning something that I have to learn at the same time. So I'm at the sharp end, still doing deals. So it's not like I've become a professor. I'm still there, being able to teach them the day-to-day things that are happening,
Exactly that.
which is completely unique.
Yeah, exactly that, John. And that'll be linked in the show notes below. Thank you very much for joining me again, guys. And I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.